Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Liberal Arts Career Lab podcast. Today, we're honored to have Molly with us. Molly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Molly Peters. I'm a photographer. I graduated from Bard in 2010 with a double major in photography and Italian studies. And currently I'm a freelancer.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really great to have you with us here since this podcast is for interviewing the alums who already went through BART, who've gone through all the challenges and opportunities of getting the first job opportunities, first internships. So I think your perspective could be very, very valuable here. Maybe just to start, you could share something about that you're working on right now.
I had a couple of assignments in January, one looking at a Nobel Prize winning scientist who had been funded by the Pew Research Foundation. So they were looking back at people who they'd funded their research in the past and where they're at now. And I did a story with Bloomberg Markets magazine on the housing, on changes in zoning laws in Lexington, Massachusetts, which is a historic community where the American Revolution started, and basically sort of efforts to create more affordable housing in the area. My personal work, the longest one, is probably the work I've been doing with the Apache Stronghold for the last 4+ years, and it's ongoing. They're a coalition of Apaches and non-native people who are fighting the US government and a multinational mining corporation in defense of their religious freedom. Basically, a mine is threatening one of their most sacred sites, Oak Flat, which is in Arizona, that would, if the mine's allowed to proceed, would not only be absolutely devastating on their ancient religious practices, but also create widespread environmental destruction. It's federal land, so it's a case that affects all Americans, whether they realize it or not. So been working with them to really try and help get the word out, help share their story with the country, because it's important for everyone, not only in the country, but all around the world.
What was the most helpful thing for you to in building connections as a student at BARD that helped you after BARD?
Especially the photo world, it's small. So people tend to remember you. So if people are not, you remember who's helpful and who isn't. You remember who's good to work with and who isn't. So it's really important not to burn bridges unless you absolutely have to. Maintain connections whenever you can. The BARD network is definitely a solid one, even among people who are not necessarily in your class. So there were BARD alums that I knew after graduating who had graduated, when I was in elementary school, but who were in the photo world, and we would meet up at different events and we would take BARD pictures with whoever was from BARD at that particular event in the photo world. And she had come to my senior show. I'd known her as my friend's mom while I was at school, and she ended up not only offering really important advice throughout my career, but also making important introductions. And, sometimes it comes from places you don't necessarily see coming.
Yeah. I wonder if you would sit down with yourself, with your younger self on day one of college, what would you tell them?
If your gut is telling you that a certain class is right for you or isn't, or a certain teacher is right for you or isn't, or jobs or anything, just because it looks good on paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. And no one else can tell you that. So like when I knew the senior project I was doing wasn't right, my advisor probably thought I was insane for wanting to change it completely halfway through. But for me, I would have just dropped the major if I hadn't been allowed to change it, because it wasn't right, it wasn't working. And so really knowing to trust that, because if I'd forced myself to push through because I was already halfway through, or it was what was expected of me or whatever, it wouldn't have it wouldn't have worked. If you know your work and you know that it's not right, you don't have to listen to everyone. And I think, I mean, that there were times that I was told word for word the exact opposite thing from two different professors about the same project, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of figure out, okay, they each have valid points. They each have different perspectives. Where do I fit in the middle? I figured out fairly early on at Bard how much debt I was going to be in by the time I was done and roughly what each class cost. So if I skipped a single class, I was throwing away a few $100s. And that, just even in that sense, it was extremely rare that I missed a class.
You said you had the decision, you wanted to major in this, but what if someone is unsure with multiple directions?
I think especially the first year to just take the classes that interest you and that jump out at you, because, you know, even some seemingly random classes that I took my first year, I'm still friends with people that I met in those classes. Or they, you know, maybe I liked the professor and then I took something else with them later. And if there is, you know, a teacher who you have a good relationship with, you know, one thing I think that's great about Bard is the professors are accessible. They're not sort of removed and up in this, you know, tower above everybody else. I've talked to a lot of photo editors who will say that they actually look for and hope for photographers who didn't major in photography, who had a different field, and what can that field bring to it. So there's a lot of working photographers now who maybe majored in anthropology or something else. You know, my Italian degree comes into play sometimes. So whatever you major in, you're not deciding the rest of your life right now. You can always change it. And again, there's so many people who, you know, what you learn will stay with you always. I didn't add my Italian major until I think the second semester of my junior year. And it was like, all right, I have all the classes. I think I needed to take one more and do a senior project. So
yeah,
I just did it. And it was a second major, so I could get away with that. But, you know, did I go in there expecting to get a degree in Italian? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I spent the first 2 years terrified that they wouldn't let me migrate. You know,
Yeah.
but that made me work really hard. And it definitely, once you moderate, then you know you're in.
So, you know, in terms of the pandemic, what was it like for you and for your workflow?
I had been traveling almost nonstop in the 6 to 9 months before the onset of COVID. And there were some really amazing projects that came out of it. So, you know, one that I participated in was called the Journal Collective, and it had emerged from Women Photograph, which is a collective of female and female identifying photographers all over the world. And we were divided into groups, but again, spanning the entire world. We were paired up with photographers you probably didn't know before, and we were put into these groups. And there was kind of a combination of, they started an Instagram account. There was different takeovers that the groups could do. So you would work on a project of some kind with your group. Some of them would sort of start up an exchange between members. So, you know, one person would make a picture and the next person would respond to it with another picture and the next person would respond to it with another picture. Or they would pick a theme and everyone would make work around that theme. And then, you know, you could curate a takeover, put it all together and put it out there. So it was a really amazing way to connect with people in this time when everyone was really isolated, to meet and work with photographers you may not have ever had the chance to meet and work with before, and really bringing in global perspectives.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for coming to the podcast.
For having me.
Yeah. And for all of the listeners, also thank you for joining. Um, for the next guest, also please stay tuned on our social media, as we'll be having more alums coming to the podcast as well. Yeah, thank you.